compromise. Of the things I say multiplied in the back of your brain. I'm guilty and I'm wrong to the very things that I hold on to. When the vanity breaks, what's to prove anyway? But here we are, with your cannons pointed right at my heart. You said you're gonna ride.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another PhotoJoseph's live show. I am so happy to see you all here today because we have a very, very special guest. This is going to be a really fun show where I get to learn a whole lot of stuff that I don't know a whole lot of stuff about, which is obviously what makes this even more interesting for me. But before we bring our special guest on, let's just get a quick shout out in the chat room. I want to make sure that we are all hearing and seeing and hearing me okay. Incidentally, if you are watching this on our guest's channel, that is perfectly fine to watch it there. However, if you do want your questions answered in today's show, please visit my channel. That's the PhotoJoseph live channel, so youtube.com/PhotoJoseph, or click the link that I've dropped into the chat on his stream there and come over to my side to ask the questions. We don't have it integrated to bring up chat questions from both sides, so this is how we're doing it here. So just again, a quick little shout out. Let's make sure that we are getting me. Everybody can see and hear. Sounds okie dokio is what I'm hearing in the chat. So let's just get this thing started. I'm just going to go straight into bringing our special guest up on the stage here. I am honored. I am pleased. I am thrilled to have the great Chito Ferradans on the screen with us. Chito, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's awesome to be here.
It is,
I'm really excited for this.
It is so good to have you here. Hey, you know what? This is strange. I've just picked up a little bit of an echo that wasn't there in our pre-show. Did you by chance drop out your headphones?
No.
Nope.
Still
Still
here.
got the headphones. Well, there's always, as soon as you go live, that's when things always break. So live audience, let me know if you're hearing him twice, if you're hearing him on echo as I am. If it's just me, I can live with it. If you guys are hearing it as well, then we got to fix something. So we'll just stand by on that in just a moment. And I want to remind people as well, if you are watching over on his channel, I'm going to drop in right now the video feed for mine. This is where you want to come over to ask questions that we can bring up on screen in our fancy streaming format. Like, let's see, I guess I got to do it this way. There we go. Nope, that's the wrong one. There we go. That's the way to bring it up, where we bring in Chito himself saying excited to be here. So that is great. So we know that is working. Tito is echoing. Bob
I started
says.
the chat.
You did start in the chat, and you are echoing. He says. Well, that is unfortunate because that was that was not happening in our pre-show.
Let me see. Maybe I had the door open.
No, it's
nothing really changed.
It's definitely, it is definitely a technical thing. So I'm gonna double check that I didn't start this on my side with some weird thing. Let's see here. It's always something. I'm gonna double check my audio mix that's coming out over here. Apologies, everybody. You know, everything always works until. It's just kind of the way it always goes. So nope, he's muted out of there. So that should not be part of the broken part. I'm gonna check one more thing. I'm taking you off the air for just a moment while I look at your audio settings. And no, you are only one there. Well,
You still have the echo?
Yep, I definitely still have the echo. And I'm hearing it through
What?
I'm hearing it through Skype actually. So there's no chance that your speakers are on. This audio's coming up with your speakers and your headphones?
No. No chance. So switching.
Sorry about this, everybody.
Headphones.
It's always the way. We're using Skype today for this, which is putting a particular challenge, but it should all be working. Ari says no echo, but tinny. I think the tinny is what we're talking about. There's like it's a very, very slight echo. It's not a long delay, but that makes it sound kind of tinny, kind of hollow. Just open up your Skype preferences for me and jump into the audio video settings, and let's make sure that your audio is still set to the mic you expect it to be. And also in the audience, let us know if it's unlistenable or if we can manage through this and we should just continue. Because that's always...
Microphone. Yeah, it's using the same mic and it's coming through the same input. So absolutely nothing changed except the hands of fate.
Except the hands of fate. Like audio phases filter. Yeah, that's what Indy's saying. Darren says it's okay. It's not terrible. We may just have to leave it. I cannot even begin to understand why or what changed.
In 10 minutes.
Yeah. And I'm not here. You're not coming out my speakers. Say something again.
Hello, hello.
Yeah,
I am here.
You're only coming through one source, so
there
is just. Well, guys, we're just going to go with it here because it is unfortunate, but it is the way it is, and we're just going to get this thing rolling. Hopefully, it's not too awful, and we can always do another version of this. Let's just do the show. People say, all right, let's do it. So, once again, welcome Chito from the channel Anamorphic on a Budget. Chito's whole thing is anamorphic video shooting. And I am a huge fan of Anamorphic, but know about this much about it. So this is going to be a fun opportunity for me to learn a lot more. But before we get into Anamorphic, I want to get into you a little bit, Chito. Let's find out a little bit more about you. So just give us just a little bit of your basic personal background. Who are you? Where are you from?
All right. All right. I am currently in Vancouver. I've lived here for 7 years now, and I'm originally from Brazil. I I studied there. I did film school there, and then I came here and studied some visual effects. Then it was like, not for me. Visual effects, I'm not sure. And then went back into film, and it was in that transition period that I actually started the channel to talk about all this stuff that it was not nowhere to be found. And here I am. I don't know. I'm terrible at introductions. I don't know how to introduce people or how to introduce myself. So.
We'll take it. I think it's just fine. So you decided that you did not want to spend your career behind a screen without ever leaving a dark room working on other people's visual effects, and you wanted to get out and make some pretty pictures yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And then I kind of ended up behind a screen in a dark room editing YouTube videos for myself. But you know,
yeah, that happens.
At least it's my own.
But at least it's your own. That's right. That's right. So that is great. So, okay, we're going to dive straight into the anamorphic part because that's obviously what we're here to talk about today, and that's what people are here to watch. Let's start with a very basic, what is anamorphic? Both technically from the lens side and also what people see. When people are watching something with shot anamorphic, how do they know that? So let's start with the how do they know, because that's how people will recognize and go, oh, now I know what you're talking about. And then let's get into the technical lens side of it.
Yeah. There's usually two very easy tells from anamorphic. One of them being lens flares, like what you have on the bottom of the frame right now. I can control those here, and you can also see them if you have like a strong light source just shining into the frame. You have this type of flare.
That's awesome.
It doesn't have to be blue. It can be multiple different colors, but there's usually this streak. That's one of the tells. The second tell is bokeh. When you're shooting anamorphic, bokeh is usually an oval instead of a circle because the anamorphic glass is compressing the picture into, let's not get into that science. That is way too complex to explain on a live stream. So we're just going to go with bokeh is oval when you're usually shooting anamorphic.
So a bokeh circle that would normally just be round is now squished into an oval shape.
Yes.
So those are your telltale signs. If you're watching a movie that has that kind of lens flare, then that is anamorphic. And this is really, really common to see. I think that for someone who's like a sci-fi kind of a thing, like a Star Trek movie where people are really going for that, you will see kind of an excessive amount of it where lights are being deliberately,
lens flares? Yes.
Lights are being deliberately shown right into the lens to get that lens flare. And then there's the films that are just shot with anamorphic lenses, and occasionally you see a lens flare, but it's not necessarily this over-the-top obvious. But I think sci-fi is definitely a place where we see a lot of it, and it's really kind of overdone, possibly.
Yeah, you could say that, yeah.
But it still looks cool. So, okay, now that we know what to look for, explain a bit of the technical, how we get there, what an anamorphic lens is that creates this unique look.
All right, I have a bunch of things on next to me, so I'm going to start picking them up and hoping that they will help us out. So here we have, this is an anamorphic adapter, so it's just the anamorphic part of a lens. And if you're looking through the front of it, you can clearly see that this is an oval. But if you look at it from the side, this is a circle. And you're like, okay, so there's some trickery going on there because the back must be an oval too. But if you look through the back, it's also a circle. And let me put this over my eye. And it also kind of makes my eye wider. If you go through the front, it's going to squish my eye. Fun times. So what this is these are cylindrical glasses. They are only distorting the image in the horizontal axis. So they're compressing your field of view onto your sensor. And they're not compressing in all directions like a wide angle lens or a wide angle adapter would do. They're just doing it in one axis. Traditionally, that is horizontal, so we want to compress things to get more width onto the shots. But you can also rotate it. These days, you're seeing more and more people try to use it sideways to get a square aspect ratio out of a horizontal sensor. So that's the idea. And this began in Hollywood in the early 50s when TVs were coming on and threatening the film industry. And what the studios wanted was something that was going to make going to the theaters a spectacle. This is something that you cannot have in your house. Like TVs were this big, and they were like, "This is too dangerous. We got to take care of it right now." So they figured out how to make the screens bigger without changing everything behind the scenes. You would continue using the same cameras, you'd continue using the same film and the same lenses. You would just throw a fancy adapter in front of it. And at that time, it was something that looked a little more like this. So it's a square thingy. And the annoying part is that this has its own focus ring.
So hold on,
So
just
you
to
have
back
to
up for a
focus
second.
two
So
things. Yeah.
Anamorphic started with adapters, not with a native anamorphic lens.
Yes.
Oh, I did not
that
know
is
that.
correct. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Okay. So in the beginning of it, you're saying the whole idea in the beginning was to do something different. And I'm sure part of this is getting that wider image. It probably wasn't necessarily about getting cool sci-fi lens flares and anamorphic and oval
Absolutely
bokeh,
not.
just getting that wider field of view, which, yeah, I can imagine. We're used to today watching a movie. Well, if you were pre-widescreen TVs, you're watching on a 4:3 TV, they would always crop it for television, which really sucked. These days, we all have widescreen TVs, and usually they don't. It's a crime, yeah. Usually they don't crop it anymore, so we'll still see a little bit of black bars on the top and bottom, but nothing like if we were seeing it in 4:3. And so the idea was, let's get them into the theater where we can give them that really wide projection and not this tiny little square image at home. And it's really interesting that it started
And
with
also
adapters.
because
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, and like before anamorphic lenses, film theaters would also have 4:3 movies. Like movies would be in 4:3 because that's kind of the aspect ratio of the film. So that was very easy to carry over to television, and that's what theaters wanted. Is like we need something that they cannot do it on TV. But yeah.
That's really cool. Okay, so I knew that back in the day there was a big scare in Hollywood when TV became a thing. And suddenly nobody's going to go to the pictures anymore. I remember that being a thing. Not because I was there. I'm not that old. But I remember that being a thing. And that's really interesting to hear that was one of the solutions to that problem. So, okay, so they started with adapters. And you can still buy adapters today. But you were about to explain how frustrating and annoying that is because it has its own separate focus mechanism.
Yeah. So it's very frustrating, actually. Adapters have an incredibly wide variety of possibilities. Like this is a good one, but this is not such a good one. And if you look at them, they look just as weird, and you're like, how can I tell them apart? It boils down to how they're built and how they handle focusing. So what you have is a system. Okay, let me backtrack. I always get mixed up on this because I jump all of the explaining. So this is a regular lens. This is a spherical lens. This is what you usually put on your camera. It's what you have on your camera. Not quite what I have in mind, but this focuses image onto a plane, which is your sensor or your film. And then you put in front of it an anamorphic adapter that is going to compress that image. And you're like, great, this is beautiful, all is wonderful, let's go shoot. But the problem is this lens, the spherical lens, usually changes focus by changing its distance from, oh, we can actually do that. No, we can't. Okay. Changing the distance from the sensor. Just the whole object system moves away and closer to the sensor to get focus. But with an anamorphic adapter, if you just move it back and forth, it doesn't do anything. What sets focus for it is the distance between the front and the rear elements. So if you set up this whole system and you're like, oh yeah, sure, I'm just going to move the whole thing back and forth, that's not really going to work because you're going to be focusing your spherical lens, but not your anamorphic block. So what you need to do is you refocus your spherical and you focus your anamorphic to match the same distance. And that's called double focus in the anamorphic adapter universe. And that's how like the early anamorphic pictures were done using Henri Chrétien's, what was the name of it? The hypergoner, which was the first anamorphic adapter and led to becoming a lens.
And that sounds
And for
challenging.
many years, yeah. So that is pretty challenging. You can get very good at it. Like I have several years of doing this, and I'm good at it, but I still hate it. So
well, it sounds like it would make any kind
it
of
takes a lot of time.
Focus tracking very difficult, if not impossible. You'd really only be able to do lock shots. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. So what Hollywood did to address this issue is they had two camera assistants or two first ACs. One that would pull focus on the anamorphic and the other one who would pull focus on the spherical lens. And this is madness. I can barely justify one AC, so I can't have two at all. What happened was in Hollywood history, what they did was they integrated these two things together in a way where this would do its own thing, and the focus of the anamorphic block would be synchronized to the focus of the spherical lens. And that worked. It was like magic. We still see the solution today in many anamorphic lenses, like the one that I'm using now, or this, which is a Sirui anamorphic lens.
So that lens is actually double focusing. It's just doing it all internally with one ring.
Yeah, pretty much. Yes. So you have one ring that is controlling how the spherical block moves and the distance between the anamorphic parts. And that's awesome, but it doesn't come without downsides, because the main downside here is when you change the distance between the anamorphic optics, you're changing the squeeze factor. And that was what a lot of people got upset about the Sirui lenses, is when you get to close focus, it's not quite what it's advertised. It says it's 1.33, and it's not really 1.33. It's more like 1.28. And you're like, yeah, that's kind of close. But on an adapter that's 2x, like this one that I have here, this one at infinity, you have 2x compression, 2x anamorphic. But when you get to minimum focus, you're more like at 1.8.
Oh, wow.
And that became a big problem for Hollywood too, because actors would start including in their contracts that they could not be shot in close-ups with anamorphic lenses because they would look fat. It would literally make their faces round and not this beautiful elongated narrow shape that it was such a big deal. It still is. But anyway, so once that started happening, Hollywood went a bit frantic, and they're like, we got to figure this out. We got to solve this problem. And one company in particular solved it for good and patented the solution. That is Panavision. They still make the best and most expensive. I mean, you can't buy it, but the most unique anamorphic lenses out there.
You literally can't buy the lenses. You're only able to rent them.
Yeah, you're only able to rent them, and you're only able to rent them from Panavision. You can't rent them from anyone else.
What a great business model.
So, oh yes, I am sure they don't regret that. So, their focus system is more complex than this. It's way more complex than this. And it's absolutely inaccessible for DIY solutions and people like you and I. So what also happened while optic designers and scientists were trying to figure this out is they realized there were other ways besides the synchrofocus and Panavision solution. And that was focus using let's get this very complicated, a variable diopter. I'm hoping you know what a diopter is.
Yeah.
Yes,
Why
maybe.
don't we explain? Let's assume that I don't.
All right. Okay, I'll assume that you don't. So this is a diopter. Let's see what this one does on my face. Okay. So one eye is clearly bigger. And diopters are traditionally used as macro filters. And what they do is they limit how far you can focus. So this is a +2. There's math to this, but this will limit your focus range to, am I in the shot? Yeah, to about
Okay.
here. +2. Yeah, here. And the stronger the diopter, the closer you focus. So this has always been a thing that people use to hack their minimum focus and get good results. Like if you can't afford a macro lens, you get a good diopter, boom, you're right there, shooting the bug's wing texture. You're like, oh yes, this is what I need.
Now you have a
So what
similar
happened for anamorphic?
limitation when you use an extension tube for macro. An extension tube moves the lens farther
Yes,
away from the sensor, the film plane, so you can focus more
yeah,
closely, but you lose the ability to focus to infinity. So it's the same problem, just a different way of getting there.
yeah, yeah. The biggest difference I would say is the extension tube makes you lose light and diopters don't.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So in Germany, ISCO, here I go butchering German, but I'm sorry, guys. ISCO Göttingen had this division designed for, in the 60s, they were like, we should make anamorphic lenses for very rich photographers, you know? Those guys with the money, we should aim at that market. So they designed the Iskorama, which until very recently was the only single focus anamorphic adapter. So it would be something like this, but that could focus by itself. You didn't have to deal with double focus. And that worked in a way where you had your system, you focused everything to infinity. So you focus your spherical lens. Let's just call it a taking lens because that's how we call it when we're talking about anamorphics. So you focus your taking lens to infinity, and you would set your anamorphic block also to infinity. On the Iskorama, it was already set to infinity, and in front of it, you will have a set of two diopters, a negative and a positive, that cancel each other out. And the way they cancel each other out is the distance between them. So when they're up close, the system power is 0. What that means is your focus is not being affected. Your system that's focused to infinity focuses to infinity, and that's about it. Good to go. But as soon as you rotate that focus ring, these lenses start to come apart. And what that does when they're coming apart is this increases the diopter power of the system. So at their furthest distance, this would be like a +1 diopter, which limits focus at 1 meter or 3 feet. And you're slowly ranging from 0 to 1. So this is slowly taking your focus limit from infinity to 1 meter or 3 feet by adjusting this one ring. And that is a very clever solution, so clever that the folks at ISCO patented it, so nobody else could make lenses like this. And this held up until 2014.
Oh,
The patent expired a long time ago, but it was in 2014 when people actually realized that they could make just the focusing part, and users like us could attach this in front of their anamorphic adapters to have single focus. And the first people to do that were the Rectilux and SLR Magic, kind of at the same time, with competing products. And everybody was mind blown. Like, I was just starting making these videos, and I'm like, how is this possible? Everything is so simple now. Because back then, this would cost $500, and an Iskorama would cost $2,500. So the difference between double focus and single focus was pretty stark
sure.
when you're Yeah, when you're just considering going into it, you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna start shooting anamorphic, and you're like, oh wow, now I can't do focus racks, or I have to shell out 2,500 bucks for an adapter that's not even a lens.
Wow.
Um,
So then, how does that
and
evolve
yeah, that's what we
into
got.
what we can buy today for relatively inexpensively? Things like the Sirui lenses that are not super wide. And you mentioned the 1.33x versus a 2x, and I want to go back and have you explain that because that's not something that's obvious
Yep.
for people who don't know. But before we jump into that, just now that there are these cheaper lenses, what is the mechanism that's in these? How does something like a Sirui lens that you can buy for what $500 or $1,000 or something like that, that's an anamorphic lens, how does that work?
Yeah.
What format are they using?
Yeah. So here, if we look through the front of the Surrey lens, you can see that the oval is not nearly as pronounced, but you can also see it's not a circle. If I had three hands, I'll hold up the glass lens here, but you get the idea. And what this lens is using is a synchro focus, so it's like the early Hollywood design. And what this does is it requires less glass. It requires a bit more mechanic engineering, like clever solutions of this is going to connect to this, and this ring's going to move these two parts and all that. But once you hack this one time, you can pretty much repeat it fast, which is what Surrey did. They have now the 24, they have a 35, they have a 50, this is the 50, and they have a 75. And they're all kind of the same thing throughout. And they're very cheap, they're affordable. I don't know exactly how Surrey, who never made an actual lens, decided to make this. I have no clue. That's like a jump that no one has managed to clarify yet. And the thing is, they started doing this. Um, this is pretty cheap, $500, $1,000 for a full lens. It's cheap. Otherwise, you're going to be looking into adapters. Adapters have lots of limitations regarding the focal length of the taking lens behind it, how it relates to the camera that you're using, and how you're going to make it single focus. Because to make it single focus, you have various solutions from $250 to 25, no, not that much, sorry, to like
Right.
$1,500. And the adapters themselves have very, very different shapes, very different prices. Like here's another one. This one's red. Um, and they have different shapes, different prices, different performance, different everything. And you just got to go through and figure out, oh, yeah, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and operate on that. The problem is that leads to buying a bunch of things until you figure out what you want. And
Yeah.
that's where I started the channel. I'm like, I've been through many of these, maybe more than most people, but how can I make this useful? How can I make this
Sure.
helpful? So I started reviewing, cataloging them individually, and
So
here we are.
these days, now that we've got the cheap Suruya lenses, is there anybody else making lenses in that price range or that simple for anamorphic?
In this price, in Surrey's price range, nope, nothing like this. The closest thing, the closest option in terms of lenses would be Vazen, and that's at 3 grand.
Oh wow.
So you'd be looking at six of these for one of those.
Right.
I don't have a Vazen here right now. They also use a different focus method, which is more elegant than what Surrey does. Uh, their squeeze is also stronger. It's not 1.33, it's 1.8. And the reason for that number is actually very smart. Vazen chose 1.8 because when you throw 1.8 squeeze on a 4x3 sensor, like all of Panasonic's anamorphic modes, or like the GH5 and the GH5 II sensor, like this is a 4x3 sensor. It's not 16 by
Right.
9. So it allows you to use the entire sensor area for recording. And when you stretch that out by 1.8 times, you get CinemaScope. Perfect, straight out of the box. And that's awesome. That's amazing. I love it. The stronger squeeze also reflects. You wanted me to expand on that.
Yeah,
One of the biggest
let's come back
differences
to that in just a
between,
moment.
yeah,
So with that 1.8x on
yep,
the 4x3 sensor, I thought, because I've played just very, very little with the Sudoi lenses, with the 1.3, I thought that you were getting
yeah,
CinemaScope if you set, I don't remember, was to set the camera to a 16 by 9 anamorphic mode. Oh, but then you're not using
yeah,
the whole sensor. I see. So that's your
yeah,
challenge.
yeah. So yeah, Surrey's idea was, since they were releasing this for a multitude of cameras like Sony, Panasonic, Fuji, Nikon, and something else that I can't, the EOS
Mm,
EFM Canon. Most of these cameras don't have 4x3 sensors or don't support anamorphic recording. So I'm pretty sure they chose 1.33 as that's a much easier approach straight out of the box if you're shooting on a 16 by 9 sensor. You're like, oh, 16 by 9, stretch it out by 133, CinemaScope.
got it.
Close enough.
And to be
But
clear, none of those
yeah,
sensors are 16 by 9. They're either 3.4 or 4.3 or
yeah,
3.2. They're cropping to shoot 16 by 9. I
yeah,
mean, that's just standard in how that works.
yeah, on
On
video.
video,
Yeah,
right? Okay, so now, all right, so now I understand. So if you're shooting with the Sudoi lens at a 1.3, you actually wouldn't set your camera to shoot in anamorphic mode. You wouldn't choose one of the 4K
yeah,
anamorphic options. You just go normal 4K, 16 by 9. So you're still looking at a
yeah,
16 by 9 image on screen. It's distorted, and then in post you stretch it out.
yeah,
Okay. All right. So
yeah.
let's talk about that
And
aspect
yeah,
ratio, that 1.3. You've just explained a bit of why, but just what is this? What is happening when you're talking about a 1.3 or a 1.8 or 2.0 anamorphic stretch?
yeah. So the anamorphic stretch is how much your image is going to be compressed. 1.3 is pretty mild. 1.33. I correct other people. I should not say it wrong. So 1.33 is pretty mild. It's very easy to shoot without de-squeezing on camera. Like if you look at a 16 by 9 picture that's compressed by a Surrey lens, you can still figure out, oh yeah, this is gonna work out. This framing is looking good. But as you go through stronger squeeze factors, like the Iskorama is 1.5, this Vistascope is 1.5 as well. It's kind of foggy. Vazen is 1.8, and then you have most projection anamorphic lenses that are 2, and most cinema anamorphic lenses, which are also 2 times. Uh, when you get to a stronger squeeze factor, you look at the frame and you're like, I hope this turns out good, because it's really hard to tell like the balance of things. So when you're shooting with a stronger squeeze, you definitely want a monitor or a camera that can de-squeeze this image as you are shooting. I've shot 2 times squeeze without de-squeezing on the spot, and I cannot recommend the experience. I've done this a bunch, so it's not like, oh yeah, I tried it once and it kind of didn't work. No, I did it a
Okay.
lot. Uh,
And to be clear too, when you're talking about de-squeezing in the camera or on your monitor, this is just the preview. The actual image written to the card is not
yeah,
de-squeezed. That is still a squeezed image, which has to be de-squeezed in post. And I do want to talk about that part of the process in a little while here.
yeah.
But yeah, what he is referring to,
Let me see something.
what he's referring to is the
Is
ability
my
to,
monitor
yeah,
showing
let me
up?
go full view on you. Yeah, people can see that.
All right, so that's kind of, let's see if I can focus it on it. Is this closer? No, that's further. And this cable has to go somewhere else. But this is the monitor that I have that is doing de-squeeze for me. So this is kind of a one-man operation system. And you can see there are black bars on top and bottom. I can also easily, let's see how easily, without looking, I can do this. Anamorphic. Nope, go back. Okay, so if I click on this, it turns off, and now you can see that the image is expanded vertically,
Right.
because the monitor is not handling the de-squeeze anymore. So I'm just going to turn this on because I don't want to go crazy.
Got it.
Right, yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
so then again,
And I'm
yeah,
gonna
people,
turn this
that
back to
is
me.
that is only in the monitoring. The image that you get out of the camera is still squeezed. That's quite the rig that you've put together there for this YouTube live show. I'm very impressed.
Oh yeah, this is I've been trying to upgrade my setup for a while. So
And so
let's see if I can
so if I
focus in one
go, so
direction.
I'm full screen on you right now, and people are not seeing the
Yeah.
full width of the image because I asked you to crop it for the stream. Otherwise, we'd have black
Yeah.
bars. Even in this view, when we first set up, we had the black bars.
Yeah.
So you are seeing Chito through an anamorphic lens, hence the flares that he has in there. However, it is cropped in for this broadcast, but only for this broadcast. Okay. All right. So now we know
Yeah.
a bit about the history of the lenses, why they came into play, how they were developed, and obviously a very abbreviated version of that history leading us up to the lenses that we have today. So when you shoot, whether using a Sirui anamorphic or an Atlas or any of these other anamorphic lenses, the image that you get in your camera, and it doesn't matter whether you're shooting on Panasonic or shooting on Sony or whatever, you're getting an image that is not does not look correct out of the camera. When you first load that into your NLE,
Yeah.
it is going to look distorted. So how do you
Yeah.
resolve that? What's the next step in that process?
So once you bring footage into your NLE, it really depends on what's your NLE. Resolve and Premiere have features where you can, no, Resolve doesn't have it. Premiere has a feature where you can set the pixel aspect ratio, and the pixel aspect ratio is what you need to adjust to correct for anamorphic desqueeze without having to stretch every clip out manually. Final Cut Pro doesn't really have it for varying squeeze factors, and Resolve also doesn't love it. They do have it for 2x anamorphic, as that's more of the industry standard. So if you shoot something with 2x anamorphic, there is a quick way to set all of your clips to be properly desqueezed. But if you're shooting with something else, you have to throw them on the timeline, and then you go onto the zoom settings or scale settings, however they're called in software, and you adjust just the X, just the horizontal axis, to be correct myself. You can adjust the horizontal axis to get a bigger image. So if you're shooting 4K, you stretch it out and you're going to get 5.1 or 5.2 horizontally. But what I like to do better is to actually compress the height. So you divide the height by the squeeze factor of the lens. And what that does is, instead of stretching out your pixels thinner, it gives you more resolution in that image, in that box that you have. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So
That was
you should have a
kind of
better
subway.
quality image that way. So you're dealing with something that's not being made wider than natural, but narrower, not narrower, less tall,
Yes.
shorter
Shorter.
than natural. That would be the opposite of tall. It would be short. Good. Excellent. And so what would you say, is it more standard to do that in the industry? If you're shooting professionally, you're doing a Hollywood thing, is it more common that you would squish down as opposed to stretching out?
That's a great question. I think a lot of the workflows in the industry involve actually stretching it out and then rescaling the whole thing to fit in like a DCI delivery format. So you have like the DCI settings are unchangeable. You can't deliver something that's like, oh yeah, this is 6.5K by 2.8K. You can't. It's 4096 by what's the other number? Yeah. So the container can't change size.
Okay.
Hence, there's absolutely no advantage for you to getting editing or working with a frame that's wider than your delivery format.
Okay.
It's always better to get into the delivery format early.
So at the end of the
as
day,
opposed
it probably doesn't
scale up and then down.
matter whether you're stretching wide or compressing vertically, because the end result is still going to be a 4096 delivery if you're doing a DCI delivery. So then it doesn't really matter. As long as your NLE isn't double stretching, you're fine, and any good NLE should handle that just fine. It's interesting, you mentioned Final Cut. I'm a Final Cut editor, and I've only ever once edited something that was shot anamorphic, and it wasn't my own footage. It was editing another project, and it was shot on Atlas lenses, so it was a 2x anamorphic. And in Final Cut, there
Yeah.
is the anamorphic override. And it doesn't tell you that it's 2x. I had to dig into the manual to figure out that it actually, and I think even there it doesn't really make it clear, but that's the only option you have is that 2x squeeze, D-squeeze. And the cool thing is
Yeah.
that then all of your
Yeah.
clips in the media browser are stretched out as well. So suddenly you see everything ultra wide in the browser. Everything looks the way it should. You drag it into your timeline. It looks normal. It's great. And I am frustrated that Final
Yeah.
Cut doesn't have other options to do a 1.33 or 1.5 because there's a lot of different options out there, and they definitely need to
Yeah,
add
there's a lot
that.
of different options.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just corrected here by Lucas, who's sending it on the chat that Resolve actually
Okay.
offers all those D-squeeze pixel aspect ratios. So it's just Final
So it's
Cut
just
that's
Final Cut
left
that's
out.
left out. All right, good. Well, it's time to place a phone call to some people at Apple and say, "Hey, you're being left behind here. Come on."
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does make it easier,
Yep.
and it is annoying to have to stretch every clip separately. That's definitely a part of the workflow that should not
Yeah.
be there.
Like fortunately, Final Cut and Resolve also have that feature where you can copy the attributes of one
Right.
clip onto the entire timeline. So you can set it on one copy paste.
Yeah, absolutely.
This can go wrong multiple ways, but it's easier.
Got it. All right, let's this is great. This is a huge amount of awesome information. There's a couple questions coming in and I do want to make sure we get to those. Incidentally, anybody who's watching this feed over on Chito's channel, come over to my channel to be able to ask questions. That way I can pull them up on screen. I don't have it set up where I can pull up questions from both channels. So that's at youtube.com/PhotoJosephLive. I've also dropped some links into the chat. In fact, I'll do it one more time right now into the chat over on Cheetos, just in case you don't have it. Pop over there to ask your questions, and we'll be able to pull them up on screen. Also, I want to make sure that everybody doesn't forget, nobody forgets, everybody doesn't forget, just subscribe. Subscribe to Cheetos' channel. Anamorphic on a Budget, you can see his channel name right there on the screen, and of course mine as well. PhotoJoseph is the main channel. PhotoJoseph Live is the channel we're on right now. Make sure you're subscribed to both of them. All the live shows are coming through this channel. I saw somebody in the chat earlier saying they haven't seen me live in a while. That's because I moved over to a new channel exclusively for doing live. So that's where this is. So please make sure you're subscribed to both. And I don't think, Chizo, you're not really on social media, right? You don't have a Twitter account. You're not pushing any socials.
No, I'm just on Instagram, but very absently. Like YouTube already eats all of my time.
I understand.
I just quit Facebook.
I wish I had the budget to hire a team to do all this stuff because there's so much that you can do. It's always the thing is there's so much you can do. Well, I'm PhotoJoseph absolutely everywhere,
Yeah.
so you guys can find me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram as PhotoJoseph. And Twitter is definitely the fun place. You really should get on Twitter. Twitter's good for conversation. I like Twitter. Twitter's fun.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
I'm too long-winded. I can't say just a few words.
Well, it's very good to learn how to compress your message into just 200. It used to be 140 characters. Now it's 280. So you got
Yeah, I
you got
know.
double.
No, I like compressing my message with this stuff. This is all the compression I can handle.
All right, so let me bring up let's get the right one. There we go. Get the right chat up here, and I'm going to start bringing in some of the comments that are coming in. And again, if you have any questions, anything at all related to Anamorphic, drop them into the chat over on my channel, and let's bring them up. Lucas Pfaff threw up this number, 4096 by 1716. So that must be, is that a CinemaScope aspect ratio?
That's the DCI. That's for sure the DCI 4K container that we were talking about. Luke is very good with numbers.
But it would be.
He was the one who corrected me on the results.
Oh, okay. So, but it would be 2160 would be standard DCI, 4096 by 2160. So is this?
Yes, standard. But this would be CinemaScope DCI.
Ah, okay. No, I did not know that either.
So even on DCI, they do shrink the height instead of going wider.
Okay. So there's multiple DCIs. That's super awesome. Thanks whoever came up with this naming scheme. Very, very helpful. Very helpful. Okay. So Shoji Productions is asking if we could see. Oh, and my system that's doing the chat thing is wigging out right now. Excellent. Asking if we could see the native aspect ratio without the cropping. Is that something you can easily reset, or is that a bit of a pain?
Oh yeah. Sometimes. Here we go. OBS. Burn my computer.
All right, let me do this.
Let's see. This is probably going to go wrong 2 times before it goes right, but it's going to be worth it. Edit. All right. Oops, wrong button.
So Chito is sending his image through OBS and then into Skype. So there's definitely a bit of pass-through looping happening here. And let's hope that he can get
Yeah.
back to normal once he's done with this relatively easily.
Fit to screen. Okay, so this is the signal, how it's coming
Okay.
through. And this is after going through a wireless transmitter, receiver, a monitor, and it's coming out of the output HDMI of the monitor into the computer. And this is what we're looking
Okay.
at. So if we were doing this for recording or like for some sort of delivery, I would edit the height to be, oh wow, it's not
So
this
this is
number.
representative of what you would see in the capture, and then once it's
Yeah.
and okay, so now that
Yeah.
you're distorting it, this is what you would see in post once you had distorted it, or on your monitor, but still
Yeah.
you'd be capturing the full height.
Yeah. So this would be, am I doing this right? I think
I
I'm
think that
right.
looks
I think I'm okay. This would be regular
right.
D-squeeze. Yeah. And then what we did was crop into this so the image is not is fitting to the whole screen and I don't look too weird because looking a little weird is fine.
Don't we all?
Did I do this right? I did it right, but then I had something else. It's not fit. Okay.
You get your.
I said it was going to go wrong
That's
a
all
couple
right.
times,
That
didn't
is
I?
perfectly all right. As we're here, I'm going to bring the chat back up while we're continuing this. And
All right.
Indy is saying this is so cool and interesting. I concur completely. This is fascinating. This is interesting. Zachariah says been trying to de-squeeze on Lightworks, which I don't know what that is. So maybe you know. But he says so far Handbrake has been useful, but that sounds to me like that means you'd be de-squeezing kind of permanently, re-rendering the file out as a de-squeeze file, which I guess is not necessarily bad. But that's an interesting approach as opposed to just doing it.
Okay.
As opposed to just doing it here, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna throw my own image up while he sorts that out.
Yeah, I'm having hard
No
times
worries.
here. So what I think they're talking about is at first someone said that they were working in a 3D studio, and I asked if they were integrating 3D with
Okay.
Anamorphic, and they're like, nah, not really. And this Lightworks reference, I think it's to 3D and how you put those two things
Got it.
together.
Makes sense. Right, I'm going to scroll back up to the top of the chat from earlier today and earlier this morning and see if there's any other questions that we might have missed. So Trevor, it's good to see you here again. It's I think you're the one who said earlier that you hadn't seen me in a while. It's good to see you here on the channel again. So make sure you're subscribed to both. Make sure you're on the live one. Panavision are the unicorn anamorphic. Yeah, I mean there's no doubt about it, and I think you probably mean that in the billion-dollar company sentiment. I don't know if they're worth that much, but certainly they are unique in what they make. They're it's some great stuff for sure. It's crazy that they've got that model where you can't buy, and it's not just their lenses. You can't buy any of their cameras or anything, right? It's all just a rental market. Trevor also says 1.33 squeeze gets you to 2.4 without having to do, but you lose all the distortion goodness. So I guess that's the going on to a 16 by 9.
I would disagree.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But
Well, let's hear what you say about
Yeah,
that. And,
like-
and I see you're still trying to mess with your camera there.
I am still. OBS is like
Oh.
Here we go. I think I found it. Okay, so this is 2160. All right, we got
Okay.
that one. 5106.
Are you
got
back?
him.
All right. There we go. He's back.
I am back. I just got to reposition myself. So let's center. Where's the center? Center to screen. Here I go.
Super.
Whew. That was intense.
Yeah, it
Okay,
should never mess with stuff like that live. Just
It never goes right.
so the here. Let me
yeah,
bring that
so
comment back
the-
up again. There it is. So 1.33 squeeze. There you go. You've got the comment in front of you.
Yeah. So 1.33 squeeze doesn't really get you to 2.4. It gets you to 2.37 or 36.4 something on a 16 by 9 sensor. So you're a little short. And while you do lose like the wild distortion, because these lenses are not, these are projection lenses. They're not made for filming, these adapters. And this one in particular, what it does is as it gets to the edge of the frame, you start to get way more than 2 times compression. So you get people on the side of the frame that are like this,
Right.
even though they're definitely not in that position. And they're really, really distorted when you push towards using that part of the glass. So that's what I think he's referring to, what we're missing. And if you use a wide enough lens with 1.33 or a lens that distorts enough, you can get that back. And you can also do a lot of distortion in post. That's what most Hollywood does, is you get everything straight, and then in post you're like, let's warp everything. And they just do
And
it.
meanwhile, the DP's going, I worked so hard to give it to you clean.
Yeah, that's actually the example on Mindhunter, where Fincher wanted like a vintage 70s vibe and anamorphic, but David Fincher, being who he is, he always wants the cleanest possible capture. So his DP, Messerschmitt, was like, yeah, we tested a bunch of vintage lenses and anamorphics even and stuff that would give us distortion, but in the end, we went with the Leica Cs, which are the most like straightest, cleanest, but not clinical lenses out there. Uh, to shoot the show, and they did all of the anamorphic look in post production. So lens flares,
Oh my gosh.
distortion, all of that was actually done in post.
That's,
When you have
well,
a
yeah.
budget, right?
But I mean, okay, I don't have the budget to do something like that, but I certainly appreciate the look and feel of getting it right in camera and getting an actual natural lens flare as opposed to something that you're adding
Yeah,
in post. I mean, it's so awesome getting that natural flare. No. Anyway, to each their own. I'm not going to
yeah,
criticize Fincher. I guess he's done a few right things along the way.
yeah.
All right, a couple other questions coming in here. Let's see here. Trevor asks, now that we have a few companies making affordable anamorphic lenses, will DIY adapters lose appeal? Will Iskorama ever be less than $3,000?
Okay, good question. I've been noticing adapters dropping in prices on eBay. I'm always on eBay watching the stuff. Rarely buying, always watching. Uh, so I've seen a downward trend where a lot of the more common adapters will lose a little bit of value, but the most popular ones are still not going down. Like you have more options, you have a wider, what is it called when you have market demand and offer and
Supply
demand?
and
You have a
demand.
wider offer, yeah, supply and demand. You have more supply, but you don't the prices are not competing. Like these Koa lenses, when I got into this, they were $400. Now they're
Wow.
1,500, and they're not coming down. It's been a while since they got to 1,500, and they haven't dropped since. Iskuramas, when I started into anamorphics, they were already $2,500. Now they're still about the same, a little bit higher. I would say like 3,000. So I don't think adapters prices will go down, mostly because the people using adapters are not going to switch over to Sure, are not going to switch over to Vazen, are definitely not going to switch over to Atlas, um, for multiple reasons. The people who just want to shoot stuff, they might. The people who like the adapter mindset, where you're like, oh yeah, I can change all of my spherical lenses. I can change the backs. I can have just one anamorphic that will create character for a whole set of lenses. Like I don't see that person being like, ah, I'm just gonna get rid of it and buy 5 Sure lenses. They're not
Sure,
gonna do
sure.
it. So I think this will stay as a niche. Adapters will continue to exist while we hopefully see more offers in terms of lenses that are cheaper. ISCO, or like actually Schneider, recently hinted at a comeback of the Iskorama. Uh, they haven't responded anything for real on the
Mm.
subject, so no one really knows what's going on. And there's always like there are no more of these adapters being made. So every time one breaks, every time one
It's
disappears, there's
one
only
less in the
less.
supply.
I don't,
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
yep. So I don't see prices going down
Do
ever.
you think that
Just hold on to
Yeah.
yours.
No, do you think that because Surui right now is making a range of lenses, 4 or 5 different lenses now, and they're all 1.33.
Yeah, they're doing.
Do you think or do you
Yeah,
know if they're going to go wider, give us a 1.5 or 1.8 or a 2x anamorphic, or is that just too cost
I
prohibitive?
don't
Okay.
know. Yeah, I've been pestering them a bunch about this. I do not know. They don't tell
Yeah.
me anything in advance. It
Okay.
sucks. All that information. Uh,
Yeah.
but I really hope they do. I hope they push something past than 1.5, like 1.6 even. Um, There are some Panavision lenses that are 1.6, so they can push for 1.6, they can push for 1.8 and start direct competition with Vazen, or just go like full blast 2x. The problem is, or not the problem, the challenge is the stronger the compression, the harder it is to make the glass.
Sure.
Like more curved cylinders will lose more quality faster, like your image won't be as sharp. The thing about Surrey lenses is that a lot of beginners and the people who really love the lenses is how sharp they are. They are much sharper than anything else you can find in terms of anamorphic adapters. Yeah, it's crazy. It's really crazy.
Okay.
So when you get a stronger cylinder, you are already pushing towards a less sharp look. So if they're aiming for like the Sony market where everybody's like, oh, the sharpest, the most amazing, the hyped lens, Surrey is going to see a drop in those numbers of like Sony consumers. One, because the cameras don't offer support for stronger squeeze factor. Two, because they will not be as sharp.
That makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. And you had mentioned earlier that these lenses are made for, the Sony lenses are made for Sony and Panasonic and a few other different mounts. Those lenses, they're all designed for APS-C or smaller sensors. Right? You can't put these onto a full frame camera, at least not without cropping the image down to an APS-C size. So so that would be a whole other lens that they would have to come up with, and it would be physically larger to project that larger image. Obviously, the cost would go up as well. But I wonder if that's something they would do, because obviously a lot of people are shooting full frame too.
Yeah, there's a lot of people asking for this. Right now, I have the Surrey 35 mounted on the S5 through an adaptation that takes it from the MFD mount to L mount. But if I'm not using the Super 35 crop, I'm getting a ton of black edges. And a ton of vignetting. And I think that was the reason why, in the first place, Surrey didn't offer L mount and our F mount, which are mirrorless but mostly full frame cameras. And they're like, we don't even want to give the option of people putting these on and being like, why is this all black? What's going on here? So yeah, they want to control the user experience.
Well, when I did the S5 Lumix S5 training videos for Panasonic, we did one video on anamorphic. So I had one of those Atlas 2X anamorphic lenses just for the making of that video, and you put that on the S5 through the adapter. Very nice. But you had to set it to crop. If you shot full frame, you had these massive vignetting. You had to go into APS-C. I didn't even, so what adapter are you using to go from the Micro Four Thirds to the L mount adapter? I have never even seen one of these.
Yeah, so this is not an adapter. It's a custom modification that's being done by some guys in the UK at MTF Services. So you send them the lens, they cut it off, mount it with the L mount or the RF mount, and send you back. I've heard from Surrey that they are going to offer L mount and RF mount in the near future. I don't know when the near future is. And the question that I asked to follow that up, that I also haven't heard back, is by offering those mounts, are they also offering full frame coverage? Because that would be a pretty big
but that would also be a whole different lens.
I don't think so at this point. It would be a whole different lens.
Good. All right, let's. We're going to wrap this up pretty soon here. We've got a couple of the comments coming in. So let's see here. Oh,
all right.
Lucas was clarifying again for the aspect ratio, 2.37 to 1. There you go.
Thank you.
Good. Excellent. See, it's interesting. There's so much.
There's
numbers guy. Yeah, there's so much to learn in this space. There really is, and I think that's part of the not confusion in that it's hard to understand, but it's just confusion in the sense of people talking about the same thing, but they're talking different numbers. Is that there are all these different aspect ratios when you do the 1.3 or 1.33 or 1.5 or like, and it's all different, and you end up with something different. But yeah, if your objective is an output that's a standard, then obviously those are standards to follow. And Trevor is very sad that he doesn't think that you don't think that the cost is going to come down on the adapters. Denim is asking, can you make some quick comparisons about Surrey, Vazen XLR Magic lenses? How would you compare quality, cost, overall experience with these?
Just a brief a hint of something that's coming up on my channel is I've spent a shit ton of time, a lot of time.
Right. We're not Disney. It's okay.
putting a bunch of stuff, a bunch of like standard tests together that involve Sirui, SLR Magic, Vazen, and a handful of other lenses, so you can compare them like side by
Okay.
side. They have very different takes. They have very different flavors. SLR Magic hit the market years ago, and they haven't invested in anamorphic since then. So they kind of like got in, made their money at the time, and are like letting the stock go. Like they're constantly doing sales. Everything has like a $600 off, $500 off, $1,000 off on the lenses and on the kits. Um, I love them. They really helped me in the beginning, and they still help me when I'm like, oh, I really want to try this out. I'm like, you got it, man. Uh, so they really want people to learn more about anamorphic, just like how Panasonic does it for their cameras. Um, but in terms of modern offerings, I would say SLR Magic is behind the others. Vazen is much more expensive than Sirui. SLR Magic shares about the same price. If we're talking about the price range, Vazen is incredibly superior to what you're getting at SLR Magic for the full lenses. For the adapters, I'm not going to compare. And then Sirui is doing something else that is completely different again, with sharper lenses, less squeeze factor, aimed at multiple cameras and multiple people. So it's hard to compare them. There's too many variables to compare. Basically, if you're trying to decide, I gotta buy something, my go-to answer has been get a Sirui, get the 35. That's gonna be the most versatile one, and go experiment with it. If you hate it, you can always sell it. It's cheaper than any of the other entry points for anamorphic shooting, and it will give you most of the look. It'll give you flares, it'll give you the squeeze, cinemascope, and all that stuff.
Okay.
That was
That's
a long-winded
okay.
answer.
That's okay. I'm going to ask you the last question. This is what's going to come from me, and then we're going to wrap this thing up. When you're looking at a lens like the Sirui, and it says, you just mentioned 35 millimeter being the most versatile. Okay, so that's a 35 millimeter lens. And if you're shooting micro four thirds, forget anamorphic. We all know that if you buy a 35 millimeter lens, it says 35 on it. You double it. It's a 2x crop factor, so that becomes a 70 millimeter.
Yeah.
How do you do this math when you're talking about an anamorphic lens? Is the 35, do you have to multiply it by the 1.33 and then by 2, or how does that work? Just so that anybody who's looking at these knows what they're getting into and doesn't buy a focal length that is not what they're expecting.
Yeah, I made a calculator for that. It's a little outdated at this point. It's on my blog. You can just find it. I guess I'll post the link somewhere in the comments after this. I was just in the process of updating the calculator this weekend. Didn't finish it. But what you want to do is you get your focal length, multiply it by your crop factor, so 35 times 2, 70, and then you divide that by the squeeze. So 70 divided by 1.33 is going to be, I'm going to say it's going to be 48, but it might be 56.
Okay, I'm pulling up the calculator on your website
practice.
right now. Let's see here. Let me go full screen on this, and then I will go. Here we go. So there's the calculator on your website. This is the anamorphic, or just anamorphicstore.com.
No!
Uh-oh, that's wrong. That's wrong place?
Yeah. No, I'll send you a link right now.
Is that not your...
/go. So yeah, that calculator is actually a ripoff of mine.
Oh,
but
no.
I don't say that much because I don't dwell on the
I don't even know
past.
how this URL got into my history then, if that's not your website. My goodness, I am very sorry. Okay. Where
okay.
are you sending me this? Oh,
I sent it on the Skype chat.
Okay.
You have it. So that is, my calculator is much more nice looking, and it takes into account a lot of other stuff that one doesn't.
All right, let's bring this back up
one
here.
of the benefits of being the original creator.
So
look at that, how young I was.
Yeah, weren't we all? Okay. So camera sensor size. So I'd say let's go for micro four thirds. Oh, interesting. You've also got GH5 open gate, but it's still 2x. GH4 Cinema 4K.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so let's just go straight up MFT. No focal reducer.
Yeah, go for MFT. That's going to be less
Anamorphic
broken.
adapter.
Yeah, there's no lenses in there. That's one of the new inclusions for the new calculator. Okay. So go with the current option.
1.33. Okay, because it's just 1.33. All right. Yeah. Single focus, none. Aspect ratio 16.
And then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then up there, you can change your taking lens. It's like the first field. You can set it to 35 mil.
Oh, right. Right, of course.
And now if you hit HFOV, it's going to give you your horizontal field of view because that's what the calculator is
Okay.
about. And it says 53. So I was wrong both times.
Okay, so the 35 is the equivalent of a 53 millimeter horizontal field of view. Got it. And then there's
Yeah.
that is the widest
And
lens,
70
isn't it?
mil
From Sudoi,
vertical.
the 35 is the widest.
No, they have a
Oh, they do.
24.
Okay. So let's type that in there.
Yeah.
So horizontal field of
Yeah.
view 36. Okay. Well, that's more usable. Well, for wide stuff. Okay.
Yeah. I'm surprised by how good the
Yeah.
35 is um, for this kind of stuff. Like I'm using the 35 right now, and it's my go-to. The 24 is darker, it's like one
Mhm.
stop darker, and it has a lot more flares. Like it flares way too
Okay.
easily, and it's not my favorite. So the 35 is the one that you can go for because it gives you that mid-range. You're like, oh yeah, I need a close-up. You can still get it without having people's faces being
Got
too
it.
distorted, and you can still get
Okay.
wide shots.
Very cool. Super. Well, hey, thank you
Yeah.
so much for this, Chito. This has been fantastic. This has been super educational. I know the comments in the chat have been great. People are really loving it. I've learned a lot here, which is just fantastic. I'm going to do this sort of thing more often.
I'm
Thank you,
glad.
thank you. And one of these days, post pandemic, we'll have to actually meet up. IRL, as the kids say. We'll have to figure out a
Yes.
way to do that.
Oh yes. Yeah.
IRL.
IRL, not URL. Yeah.
Thanks again. So once again, everybody, for if you aren't already subscribed to his channel, you can see it on your screen there, Anamorphic on a Budget. Do make sure that you go and subscribe to his channel right now, as well as to mine. Both channels, PhotoJoseph and PhotoJoseph Live, two separate YouTube channels. Make sure you're subscribed to both of them. I actually have been talking to Surui, or Sure, you were pronouncing it, so maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. I guess I should probably figure that out. Uh,
I'm getting it from their videos,
oh,
so they're always like
Interesting.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I
I'm
will
like, okay, I
verify
guess
with
that's
them
that.
before I actually do anything. But I've been talking to them about working on a video and exactly what that it will entail. So hopefully that's something that'll come to my channel
Yeah.
at some point in the near future as well. And this is great, getting all this information and knowledge. Everybody's in the chat saying thank you again. Thank you all for watching. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next live show. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Thanks. All right.